Did you know that the ancient Greeks feared even the image of Medusa? That her face was carved on shields, amulets, and above doorways, not to glorify, but to ward off evil? But before her gaze began turning all living things to stone, she was a human, alive, beautiful, mortal, far beyond Olympus, in the depths of time and sea foam, where no muse dares sing, lived three monstrous sisters, the Gorgons. Their names, Steno, Euryale, and Medusa. They were born of the ancient sea deities, Perseus and Ceto. These names are nearly forgotten, but in archaic myths, Perseus ruled the sea monsters, and Ceto was the goddess of the deep and dread. Steno, the mighty; Euryale, wide-stepping; Medusa, the guardian. The two eldest were immortal, their bodies covered in scales, their breath deadly, and their hair had long since become serpents. But Medusa was different. Medusa was mortal. That alone was a curse. To be born among monsters and yet be human. To be beautiful among what cannot die. In the oldest legends, forgotten by Ovid's Metamorphoses, Medusa was not merely a girl, but a priestess. Her beauty was said to be otherworldly. A face carved by the gods, skin like ivory, hair of black waves flowing over her shoulders, shimmering like the midnight sea. People traveled from afar just to see her. Some sat in silence for hours in her presence. She was not merely beautiful. She radiated a power that did not belong to mortals. And this angered the gods. It was said that even Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, could not bear Medusa's presence without envy. But Medusa did not seek love, or power, or divinity. She gave herself to the temple of Athena, virgin goddess of wisdom and war. Temples were sacred places. Priestesses of Athena swore vows of chastity and dedication to knowledge. They wore long robes, wove olive wreaths, and read ancient texts. Medusa became one of the most revered among them. But others watched from above, especially Poseidon, god of the sea, brother of Zeus, lord of tides and storms. His desire was as vast as the ocean. One day, while Medusa prayed alone in the temple, Poseidon came to her. Not as a king but as a storm. He did not ask. He took. Myths differ. Some say he seduced her. Others, that he violated her upon the altar of Athena. This is the true origin of the curse. Medusa became a victim, but the gods did not care for her pain. When Athena learned that her temple was defiled, her wrath fell not on Poseidon. She could not challenge him. Instead, she unleashed it on Medusa. And then came the transformation that entered legend and nightmare. Medusa felt her skin changing. Her hair moved, hissed. They were snakes. Her flesh shimmered cold and gray. Her hands trembled. Her voice vanished. She screamed, but only a roar escaped. When she looked into the water turned away. From that day, anyone who met her gaze turned to stone. Not for a crime, not for guilt, for being a victim and daring to survive. After the curse, Medusa vanished. She did not flee, she was exiled. Not by decree, but by looks. People averted their eyes, covered mirrors, closed windows if they heard her footsteps. Even animals sensed her, and froze like statues at the faintest rustle. She ran through mountains, forests, deserts. At night she tried to look at the stars, but even they turned away. The snakes in her hair no longer obeyed. They hissed and moved with their own will, warning of danger or being it. Her face was seen by no one. She found refuge in distant lands, beyond the map of mankind, where names ended and fear began. A place called the Hesperides, the edge of the world, the edge of night. Medusa built her home from broken stone, not because she found it, but because it was people. People who came with weapons, torches, and curses. She did not kill, she merely looked. Soon, people feared not only Medusa but her name. Soldiers refused to speak of her. Blacksmiths refused to forge blades for those who hunted the Gorgon. Oracles foretold doom to any who sought her. Still they came. Many tried to kill Medusa, the brave, the mad, the vain. One of the first was Liar, a Spartan warrior with a mirrored shield. He hunted her for days. He was ready. But when he heard her breath, he looked, just slightly. That was enough. He became a statue of horror and regret. Another, Amatus, a philosopher from Athens, sought to understand and forgive her. He reached her cave. She remained in shadow, silent. He stepped forward and said, "You are a symbol of pain, not guilt. I do not fear you." She looked at him. He didn't finish the sentence. She began to hate her gaze, but she could not control it. Athena's wrath was absolute. Sometimes Medusa painted, on stone, on bones, on the walls. She painted the sun she could no longer see, people she remembered, herself with a face she no longer had. Sometimes the snakes in her hair coiled around her, as if to comfort her. Sometimes she sang, and the sound made the earth tremble. One day she saw a child. Lost. She hid. He passed by and never looked at her. And Medusa cried for the first time in years. Tears streamed down her skin, but when they touched the ground, they turned to glass. People began depicting her face on shields, on medallions, on walls. But not as a beauty, as a monster. White eyes, tongue out, fangs, snakes. Not a portrait, a talisman. They believed, if horror drives away evil, let Medusa's face protect. Thus began an age where the victim was called a weapon. Medusa lived on, alone, in silence, among stone faces and wind. She became a different kind of deity, not good, not evil, but ancient. She no longer lived as a human, but she was no monster. His name was Perseus, son of Danae, a mortal, and of Zeus himself, king of the gods. He was born in confinement. His mother had been locked in a bronze tower, for a prophecy declared that her son would bring death to a king. As in many myths, the king tried to outwit fate. But Zeus entered the tower in the form of golden rain. Thus Perseus was born. From childhood, he knew he was not like ordinary mortals. But his path as a hero did not begin with glory, it began with treachery. When Perseus came of age, his stepfather, King Polydectes, sought to get rid of him. He pretended he was preparing for marriage and said to Perseus, "Bring me the head of Medusa. Let that be your wedding gift to me." It was a death sentence. Everyone knew, no one returns from the Gorgon. Perseus set off. But he was not alone. He carried the favor of the gods. Athena, the goddess who had cursed Medusa, gave him a shield like a mirror. Hermes, god of messengers and thieves, gave him a sickle made of adamant. The Hesperides, guardians of twilight, gifted him a magic pouch. And Hades' helm of invisibility completed the divine armory. He did not walk alone. He walked with Olympus at his back. His destiny was not just to kill, but to erase the memory of pain. Medusa was asleep. She did not know she would die that day. The snakes were silent. The forest was still. Everything held its breath. Perseus approached, not looking at her directly, but through the reflection in his shield. He did not want to see her face, perhaps not out of fear, perhaps because her face was still human. When he was close enough, he raised his blade, and with one swift stroke, severed her head. In that instant, from the wound on Medusa's neck, sprang two new beings, Pegasus, the winged horse, Chrysaor, the giant with a golden sword. They were the children of Poseidon and Medusa, born not in life but in death. Perseus placed Medusa's head in the magic pouch. Her gaze remained deadly. From that moment, she became a weapon of the gods. Perseus used her head against his enemies, turning entire armies into stone. Later, he offered it to Athena. She placed it upon her shield, the Aegis. Thus, the symbol of suffering and violence became the ornament of the goddess of wisdom. Medusa died, as the myths foretold. But she remained, in memory, in stone, in art. She became a victim called a monster, a mother who bore a winged miracle, a symbol of how gods punish what they themselves cannot control. The myths about her live on, but with each passing century, they shift. What if she was never the enemy? What if Perseus was not a hero, but an agent of divine fear, sent to silence a woman who had survived the gods? Medusa looked, and people turned to stone. But maybe they saw themselves and couldn't bear it. After Medusa's death, her head was fixed onto Athena's shield, the Aegis. This shield became a sign of terror and protection, used in battle to strike fear into the hearts of enemies. But the Greeks did not only depict her on weapons. They painted her image on walls of homes, on doors, above cradles. Not as a monster, but as a guardian. This strange contradiction birthed the first legend. They say Medusa's head, though severed, still sees everything. And if you've lied, betrayed, or killed, her gaze will find you, even through dreams. Interesting facts. In some regions of Asia Minor and Epirus, there existed secret women's cults where Medusa was not seen as a demon, but as a protector of women. There, her name was never spoken aloud. They drew her with a human face and sorrowful eyes. They prayed, "Look upon those who seek to break us. Let their tongues turn to stone." Archaeologists of the 20th century uncovered ceramics where she was shown cradling an infant, surrounded by snakes. Not threatening, but embracing. But what is the symbolism of the snakes? Medusa's serpents were not just fear and venom. In ancient beliefs, snakes were symbols of rebirth, guides between the worlds of the living and the dead, keepers of forbidden knowledge. Thus, Medusa's hair was not just a curse. It was the crown of a priestess of the underworld's wisdom. There is a legend that in the caves of Greece you can still find stone figures, those who once came to Medusa. Some statues are unimaginably detailed, fingers mid-motion, mouths open, tears frozen like glass. One tale says, if you gaze into the eyes of one of these statues under the full moon, you will see what it saw in its final moment, and hear Medusa's voice, singing from the heart of stone. Lesser-known facts. In Etruscan mythology, Medusa was a benevolent being, guarding the gates of the afterlife. In a rare papyrus, she was called the voice of the earth, for her gaze silenced lies. In later versions of the Perseus myth, it said he pitied Medusa upon seeing her face, and never looked a woman in the eyes again. In Egypt's late period, Medusa was merged with Sekhmet, goddess of destruction and healing. On certain Roman tombs, she was portrayed weeping, not terrifying. Medusa as archetype. Today, psychologists and mythologists see Medusa not as a monster, but as an archetype. A woman who survived violence and remained unbroken. One who is blamed for her own pain. A symbol of transformation from victim to force. Her gaze petrifies not only flesh but hypocrisy. What if she is still alive? Some legends say Medusa's head was never destroyed, that an ancient order still guards it. And every 100 years, someone looks into her eyes to remember the price of silence. And that one day, she will awaken, and the world will once again see its true face in her gaze.